Obviously, today is the 5-year anniversary of the big protest for George Floyd over in Iowa City that ended with police using flashbangs and some tear gas. You were there. Talk to me about what you remember.
Yeah, it was something the protests themselves and events related to it had started a few days before that. And started just, with a few events like on the Ped Mall and some folks really airing a lot of emotions, what they were feeling, a lot of frustrations that they were feeling at the time. And then one night it turned into some protests outside the mall in Coralville. And so I went down there that night. And by the time we got there, things had kind of dispersed. We had heard there's some action, but we were up in Cedar Rapids, then got down there and things had dispersed by that point. And then more action was happening the next night. And I had happened to meet someone out there, one of the protesters, who gave me his number. And because it was kind of like a secret of where these protests were going and when they were starting. And I just happened to be the one person who had a connection because I'd met some guy a few nights before and he kind of kept me in the loop. And so, by the sake of that, I ended up having to go down there every night because I knew where they were going to be starting, what they were going to be doing. And especially that night of the tear gas and the flashbangs when the protesters were trying to get onto the interstate. I mean, I just remember it was such a hot day. I tell people I live in South Carolina now, and it is, ungodly hot during the summer and the spring and the fall. And I tell people Iowa gets just as hot and humid. It's just not, like that for months on end. But this was one of those stretches where it was so darn hot and humid. And so we had been marching all throughout Iowa City following the protesters, getting video, things like that. And we were just, I mean, dripping sweat by the time the sun went down. And we had been out there for hours, walked miles following them. And then it became apparent as they were marching toward the interstate that, oh, they're going to try to get on the interstate. So I remember there, a few different TV crews there from the stations. And we end up, our TV9 crew, with Mike O'Brien, who was a sports reporter, but because of COVID, ended up getting shifted around and was working the camera that night as the photographer. And then, of course, I was the reporter. We end up being like way in front of everyone. So we were like right there. And it's pitch black outside because it's, pretty late at night. I think it was like 10 or 11 at night at this point. And so we were right there when the flashbangs started going off. And I'm someone who is very easily startled. So that really kind of, I'd heard a bunch the previous nights, but it still kind of every single time startled me. And then all of a sudden we were on Facebook Live the entire time. So of course, everyone from the station knew what we were experiencing because they're all watching it. And then all of a sudden Mike just yells at me. He's like, Mary, close your eyes, because he knew the tear gas had been set off. So he felt it before me, told me to close my eyes. So I closed my eyes. Thankfully, it didn't get in my eyes. It got in his, got in the eyes of everyone around us. But I still was breathing it. So we're all coughing and coughing. And it was, unlike anything I've really ever experienced. And then that went on for a little while. And I think they dispersed after that. And so, yeah, it was definitely a night I will never forget.
Definitely. What were the reactions of the people there that were also experiencing this with you? Were they, getting violent at any point, or were they just, what happened once those flashbangs and those tear gases went off?
I don't remember any sort of violence. I think that was something that kind of stuck with the rest of us, that it 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 was a lot of, like I said, frustration, a lot of pent up emotion. And I think when the tear gas and the flashbangs were going off, I mean, the flashbangs after a few rounds, people were just kind of becoming immune to it, except for me, again, easily startled. But the tear gas, it definitely, kind of stunned everyone because you're all of a sudden it's in your eyes. Your eyes are uncontrollably watering if it gets in your eyes. If not, you're breathing it in, you're coughing, and so there's really not a whole lot you can do because you just have these uncontrollable reactions to this. So that definitely had an impact of kind of you definitely settling things down for a little bit.
Definitely. Were you able to talk to any of the protesters? I know you said you had the number of one of the guys, but what were they feeling? What were they saying?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, it was interesting as a reporter because folks were walking through, the downtown Iowa City and the very much public places, but there's also this sense of like not wanting to have their identities disclosed on TV or to reporters for some people because there was this mistrust of law enforcement, police, and this thought that law enforcement was going to be watching these protests and following who the protesters were and trying to figure out who they were. So when we were walking with them in broad daylight, again, on public roads, there were people like standing in front of our cameras to try to block us from getting video. So things, for us as reporters, we have a right to be there. You're in a public space. We're there to document what's going on, to let folks know this is what's happening. I mean, certainly this is a newsworthy event going on in Eastern Iowa. So there were definitely some, tense moments of people kind of getting in our faces because they wanted us to be there on one hand to let folks know this is happening, but also didn't want specific identities revealed. So things did get a little tense. Even when they were walking toward the interstate, like I said, I mean, Mike and I were the only reporters who were that close. Everyone else was further back. Another station had a crew that was on the other side of the police line. I mean, Highway Patrol, I am sure Johnson County Sheriff, Iowa City PD, they all had formed a line to physically block the protesters from getting that close to the interstate. And so another TV crew was on the other side, but we were the only ones who were really right with them and keeping up with them. And I mean, we had people getting in our faces, kind of yelling at us, asking where we've been. And we're like, we've been here for hours, And then the next night when they actually did get on the interstate, I remember someone got in our faces and was like, where were you last night? Why weren't you here? And I was like, oh, you can go back. We were definitely here. We got tear gassed. We heard the flashbangs, So it was one of those things with just the combination of the emotions and the frustration over what had been happening with George Floyd, and then feeling that reflected in their own communities at times, and or with people they loved and had experienced something where that created some sort of mistrust with law enforcement. And then I mean, I think there were a lot of emotions because COVID and everyone was locked down, and it had been like that for a few months, and then certainly the heat with it being so darn hot and humid, it was a lot of frustration going on at the same time, a lot of tense moments.
Did you ever think when you kind of got into an industry like this, you would have to cover something as intense as that?
Oh, definitely not. It's certainly one of those nights that I never would have predicted you would cover. You get prepare for anything in this industry. I think that's what we all say is, we all enjoy our jobs because every day is different and you never quite know what you're going to get. But something like that, I mean, I didn't think I would necessarily be in the middle of a protest where I am getting, tear gassed while being on Facebook Live. And I know at various parts they were taking it live on air and cutting in. So I never thought I would experience something like that. And certainly now that I specifically just cover politics, it's definitely a whole lot different from what I had covered, 5 years ago, that's for sure.
Definitely. You've touched on it a little bit, but what is the biggest thing that sticks out from you from that night?
Oh, the tear gas for sure. I mean, one of those, when we're on TV, especially when we're live, you try to be as in control as possible, of course, in control of what you're saying, how you're saying it, your presentation, how you look, what you are showing on TV. And that's one of those things where that tear gas hits you and you have an uncontrollable reaction. Like I said, thankfully, Mike felt it before me and he had the foresight to yell at me to close my eyes, or else it would have been getting in my eyes all over the place. But you have this uncontrollable coughing and then you feel it on your skin and everyone around you is feeling that too. So that's definitely, I mean, the part that's just totally unforgettable from that night.